Apfsds. In other words, armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, or simply called the sabot, a dense, slender, thin projectile traveling at several times the speed of sound. A modern kinetic energy penetrator, the ideal ammunition for modern fighting vehicles in engaging armored targets. The dart consists of several parts, mainly the main body, the tip, the sabot, and the fins, typically around 800 millimeters long, of highly dense material and fired from a smoothbore barrel. Its shape allows it to effortlessly cut through extreme angles, unlike other rounds which could fail, shatter, or break. The average dart exceeds the speed from around 1400 to 1800 meters per second. On impact, given the speed it's traveling, armor doesn't behave like a solid object anymore, instead mimicking behaviors of a plastic fluid-like manner. The Apfsds can penetrate up to 750 millimeters deep, or 29.5 inches of depleted uranium. Of course, this can vary on range. The Apfsds can be shot and effectively engage a target from 3 kilometers, and penetrate up to 530 millimeters, or 20.8 inches, at said distance, which is still impressive. All of this info is based on American M829, one of, if not the most powerful Apfsds ever fielded, and one of the many darts. And speaking of, there is tons of others around the world. American, British, German, French darts are basically the same thing, because, well, NATO. Aside from that, there's Russian darts and Chinese darts, some of which operate differently than others, especially with British and Russian darts. So what makes them so different? Before the Apfsds came to be, its predecessor, the APDS, or the armor-piercing discarding sabot. Sabot, a French word for clock. You get it? The APDS was invented by the French.
Does she know how to make a grill?
Developed in the 1930s by Edgar Brandt and his company, developed sabeted munition, an ammunition design of which a heavy subcaliber core is surrounded by a lightweight sabot, which is still the key principle of modern kinetic energy penetrators today. But you'll notice some differences. The wider girth, shorter length, but also its familiarities, its sabot and its material, composing with the same concept of dense properties. But then, the Germans went in and Brandt went out. Onwards to England, where the British joined the development from there, while also branching off, adapted and developed in parallel the APCR, but this video is not about that, so... After that, the British then fielded the APDS in mid-1944, introducing the round to their 57mm QF 6-pounder and later to the 17-pounder by September. However, this wasn't the first. The French did it first. The Brandt 37-25 round, the first ever APDS surfaced in the world. As the German onslaught steamrolled over the Falklands, they managed to put these into limited production. It's unknown how many were actually produced, but the army requested about 200,000, and presumably put to limited use too. So that's like limited squared. Then the war was over. 6 million Soviets meet 1.6 million Americans. Both sides has conquered, divided, and the Cold War begins. As so, both sides continued the development and usage of APDS. Tanks such as the Centurion, M48, T-55s, this fucking thing, forming the first generations of the beginning era of main battle tanks. The APDS was used widely by these tanks. Until... the T-62 came around, as a further development of the T-55, a predecessor of it if you will, but something's different, something's changed. The barrel was a smoothbore. Why the fuck is the barrel a smoothbore? Introducing the 3BM9, the first ever Apfsds in the world. This considerable leap against NATO tanks was worrying, and their reaction? Nothing. Silence. For now, while the Soviets keep bulking up, more longer penetrators, more denser penetrators, the T-64 was introduced, then the T-72, tens of thousands of them were produced. until the West had finally come up with something. The M60A3 was introduced, the Abrams came out, the Bradley accompanied them, the TOW 2 was developed, the Apache was hovering above, and the Hellfire was flying over. Designated the 3BM3, the first ever APFSDS in the world. It was fired from the newly introduced 115mm U5TS smoothbore barrel, a significant upgrade over the T-55's 100mm D10T. Firing an APFSDS from a rifle barrel is fine. However, it could reduce the round's penetration, speed, accuracy, and most importantly, stability. But why? Before the APFSDS, rounds generally looked like this: AP, APHE, APHE CBC, APHE AT, SHFS DSTI, APCR, and even APDS. Instead of utilizing fins like the Sabo, they utilized gyroscopic stability in flight via from the design of rifled barrels. Or in short, they spin. For the Sabo, however, it's different. Due to their long, thin shape, are generally unstable and tend to stumble in flight. This was a problem in the development progression from APDS to APFSDS. To solve this, they added a stabilized fins to help the Sabo stabilize in flight, without the need of rifling. Thus why APFSDS are generally fired from smoothbore barrels. The British APFSDS is an interesting case. Instead of using smoothbore barrels, they still utilize rifled barrels.
Not like those smoothbore American ones that just hit something over there.
That is until the Challenger 3 was announced. But still, so how could their Sabo round stabilize in flight? When fired from a rifled barrel, the round's own fins doesn't work with the gyroscopic stabilization, making the round even more unstable. Not only that, but it could also decrease penetration, accuracy, and structural damage to the Sabo itself, while also making the rifled barrel more vulnerable to premature wearing. In fact, the American Bradley also fires APFSDS with a rifled barrel. So how did they do it? Simply adding special slip bands or driving bands that counteracts the rifling, and one side of the barrel behaves like any ordinary APFSDS round. But why? Well, it's all about HESH. You see, HESH, or technically high explosive squash head, but we don't call it that, is a type of round the British, and especially the British, absolutely love. The British favors HESH more than the heat round. They both, I guess you could say, are alternative to each other. Simply put, HESH rounds are more effective when it spins, therefore why it needs rifled barrels. And in Heat's case, if needed to be fired from a smoothbore gun, they just added fins to it. In short, the British love HESH. So much so that they needed to somehow keep it alongside having an APFSDS in the loadout. At least it's nothing crazy like, I don't know, having a 2-piece ammunition. That'll be complicated. Okay, I know the Brits also use 2-piece munitions, but I don't care, stick with the transition. So, 2-piece munitions. This is used on the British Challenger 2s and Russian T-72s, 90s, 64s, and 80s. And looking at the numbers, safe to say Russia's operating the most with these things. And, oh god, here's the question. Why? Two things: space and length. As time goes on, the Sabo needed to penetrate more sophisticated and thicker armor. So how do they do this? Well, make it longer. The longer the better. More length means the rounds take more space, and that means less space for the tank and squishy crews moving the damn thing around inside. And looking at Russian tanks, yeah, you see why they use 2 pieces. Although it does not have the best placement, but its upsides are still applied. Unitary rounds are heavier, and in cramped tank spaces, slower to reload, while 2-piece munitions is lighter, could be stored in a compact package, and with autoloaders, it completely eliminates the need for a loader. For a human loader. A perfect fit for Soviet tank doctrine, that is, a mass of tanks fighting on a big open field. While that's not entirely different from today, only adding rapid mobile deadly artillery, drones, and apparently black magic.
What the fuck?
Alright, that should be enough said. Let's just get to the next chapter. Some footage had been captured from games. These games, all of which included APFSDS. No shit, one of them stands out from the rest. From the depths. Now, in From the Depths, you make your own rounds. You make your own everything actually. How From the Depths handles projectile designing is actually pretty modular. Everything is built segment by segment, piece by piece. The game doesn't rotate around it, of course, there's bigger fish to fry. The common choice amongst people is either the heat or hash. Because it's simple enough to understand, projectile dodge bad guy creates spark inside. Some of you have watched my last From the Depths video. Most of you definitely don't. Go watch it. It's a cinematic masterpiece. Anyway, Sabo in FTD are not the main choice of anti-armor munition in the game. It's one of the choices. There are arguably and engineeringly more better munitions or methods. Important thing to note is the world of From the Depths is very different from real life, size-wise and warfare-wise, due to the game being centered around boats. On land, everything is much larger. 3.77 times larger to be specific. If a real life Abrams were to be right next to an Imperial MBT, here's what it would look like. Are not the main choice of anti-armor munition in the game. So what is, I hear you wonder? Well, it depends on threat, but ultimately, when in doubt, use missiles. ATGMs preferably, but normal ones work too, and numbers further complement it. The main thing is an ideal offense weapon is it's simple, easy to use, and most importantly, cost effective. Very, very important if you want to win a war. Making an effective APFSDS sneezer is not easy. A regular gunpowdered APFSDS is not enough. Remember, everything is 3.77 times larger. That means armor could be about 8 meters deep. The fastest I could do with a gunpowder only design is 1300 meters per second. So, the only way to effectively use the APFSDS is with railguns. With railguns, the velocity jumps to 1900 meters per second, much like a real-world counterpart, and you could even go higher. But it ain't that easy. See, a railgun needs power. To store power, you need a battery, and power just doesn't materialize on its own. That means you need a generator. This is what I mean by cost effective. However, an APFSDS could make up for its cost, depending on the design goal. Now, enough about From the Depths. What about in other games? Well, there's Sprocket, but that's limited to World War II, so... Well, let's see others. A game that simulates APFSDS down to the last minute of detail. Let's take Gunner Heat PC.
Identify!
Gunner Heat PC is a very neat game. Set in 80s Europe, Cold War gone hot, the Reds are pouring over the Boulder Gap. You command various NATO vehicles to stop them, or the opposite. You commie bat and used to throw at each other the APFSDS. Many Cold War era APFSDS. Gunner Heat PC has an AIR mode display, showing you all of the effects of tank rounds against armor, thicker armor, no armor, the earth itself, and flesh. It's all a very in-depth simulation, treating penetrators as real dynamic projectiles. The realest thing your PD eyes had ever perceived. The AAS viewer shows armor interaction in stunning detail, down to the angle, velocity, and damage traced through vehicle internals. It's no ordinary hit scan or dice roll. Steel Beast. This is another great one. Similar to Gunner Heat PC, well except it's not. This is a simulator. This is a realistic arcade. At the end of the day, this is a game. Sure, it's a realistic one, but it still retains the arcadeism. Steel Beast? Wow, look at that. Now I know I didn't immediately jump to it. Why? Shut up. Look, I don't have Steel Beast, okay? So I can't really give it a special show to the video, you know? And fun fact, it's used to train actual crews. So that's pretty cool. Big points for that. And that's it about it, I can say. I just got out of high school, and that probably applies to some of you watching. God bless us all. So no more burdens are chained upon mine. In other words, the content flow should be clean. And I'll see you again. Goodbye.
Identify! target locked.